All right, I'm farming my friend Baxter for content right now. And the question is there an objective order to the universe? And if there is it because of God? Is it because of some sort of inherent gravitational sort of objective standard to the world? And if there is that sort of objective sort of teleology, where do we come to that conclusion? And is it just a construction that we've used to map out the world? What do you think about that?
So, the shortest answer I could give, which I briefly explained earlier, is that I believe that God is the center of order. Now, He can create systems that, manage that order by themselves, but let's see here.
Like he can set in place some sort of say, just for instance, gravity.
Yeah.
He can put that in place. We're not gonna fall into, like I was saying earlier, occasionalism, where every action and reaction is directly controlled by God. God can create systems that work on their own as an autonomously.
Yeah, sure. And I'm trying to think of the original question, how to bridge that.
Talking about, let's say that there is an objective structure to the universe. Then how, by finding out what the objective structure is, how can we figure out what morality is?
Okay.
Based off of whatever we find out that structure is.
So, I guess according to Christianity, it's just what God says.
Sure.
And that His word is the law.
But is it objective?
Well, see, that's the thing.
Or does it change?
It has changed.
Yeah.
Now, is that God's intention? Well, we don't know. But,
or could it be that we're interpreting the change? We're interpreting a change? Because you know what Andrew says? He can't, a perfect being can't change.
Yeah.
So therefore, whatever flew in the Old Testament necessarily has to fly now. So eating pork, it's no bueno. You can't be doing that, because if a perfect being sets a law in place and he says this is a perfect law, it can no longer change. Now people in the comments immediately are going to be like, well, it's been fulfilled. Then you look into what fulfilled the word is, it's plenehu or something, and then that means a bunch of different things, and you can get into all kinds of semantics over that. But let's just go with the broad stance of all right, God says don't murder.
Yeah.
Does that mean that we shouldn't kill people?
Yeah.
Period? Or does that mean we can kill people, but only when it's in a convention that we come up with called war? Or how does this work?
What are the parameters for, say, self-defense?
Yeah.
What constitutes murder? What constitutes a righteous kill? And does that change? Because, sometimes, let's say in the West, now this has been something that has become increasingly more complicated, say the defense of your own self-property. That would be considered murder by the American government in certain cases. And where does God stand with that? It's because if we're supposed to align our legislation according to biblical rule, at least in theory, then that should be unwavering to a degree. Murder is murder, and self-righteous kill is a self-righteous kill. It shouldn't be something that changes over time. But
let's remove God's law. Let's just say God doesn't exist, but there is still some sort of underlying structure to the world, and there is some sort of natural law.
Okay.
It's pretty hard to come to that conclusion, without God, but let's just try to go there real quick.
Sure.
So maybe there's some sort of like karma or something like that.
Like the law of reciprocity or something.
I guess the best way to phrase this, if God doesn't exist, do all things become lawful?
Like, describe that. What do you mean?
If God doesn't exist, does that mean that there is no objective standard to morality?
I don't know. It's like there's not really an example otherwise. Like, I think everything that we know about, like, objective morality is based on, like the idea of there being a God.
Sure, some sort of standard of absolute truth.
Yeah.
But we all have different, different cultures have different ideas about this.
Sure.
Like not everybody has the same system. Now they can come to roughly similar conclusions.
Yeah.
Like, murder and thievery
Yeah,
are generally going to be.
But see, that I wouldn't say is objective. I think that's just a collection of like subjective ideas that are agreed upon.
Yeah, but there has to be some sort of utility to it, most likely. Now that brings us to the question of whether morality, you can boil it down strictly to what is utile, or what works for the most amount of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people want to say that that's why we are moral. That's why, because we want to try to get through life in such a way that the least amount of feathers are ruffled in a way, and everybody gets sort of similar amounts of happiness.
Sure.
That would be Mill's idea. But I don't even remember where this was going.
Well, the original question was like, well, we took God out of the equation and saying if there is an objective morality without. I would say no.
Yeah.
I would say no, there isn't. And if there is, I think it'd be impossible to find that out.
Yeah.
And
That's kind of like the tricky spot that we're in now with like postmodernism.
Sure,
Everything
sure.
is. That's why Jordan Peterson kind of is going off, and we've talked about that before. He's kind of trying to bring back like Christianity in the same way Dostoevsky was trying to, because he realized the problems that were going to start to spring up.
Yeah.
It's like now we have this sort of moral relativism. So Jordan's trying to bring back some kind of structure.
yeah.
I just don't know if it's going to work.
Yeah, which I think is a good idea.
Yeah.
But it, what is the saying that you used? Not one true Scotsman.
Oh, the true Scotsman.
No true Scotsman. Where like the Christians won't agree with Jordan and the atheists won't, but it does kind of bridge it better than it would without Jordan's rhetoric.
One thing I was thinking about, this is kind of disconnected, but thinking about sort of structures that we have to describe the universe and the way that the world works, it all kind of ties back to like attributing a meaning to something. This is called teleology, which telos just means end. So there's like, the end of something. It means that there's some sort of purpose for a certain thing. So you could say that my eye's purpose is to see, and my hand's purpose is to grab things. But is this objectively true? I mean, in a sense, it's like, yeah, of course that makes sense, because you can't see with anything else, and we need to be able to see in order to like move around. But within scientific, or within like evolution, people have sort of given up on this idea that everything has like an objective, like this exists to accomplish this purpose.
Yeah.
And now they're looking at it more as like this is an attribute that we have applied to the thing, rather than it just objectively being that way. But I'm trying to wrap my head around that. Like, how that even works. Like, because obviously as humans, we create things that are like meant for things. Like a hammer is meant to hit a nail. But what's the purpose of like a rock?
Yeah.
You know, it just happens to like be here.
Well, yeah, and like something like that is so multifaceted that there's no way to boil that down.
Or like a tree stump. It's like, you know, you can create a chair, you can fashion a chair, but you can also use a tree stump as a chair. Like now we've just sort of applied these ideas to what it's here for, whereas objectively there may not be any sort of direct purpose for a thing. Now if you believe that way, then it's like, oh, there is no objective purpose now. So what do we do with that?
Well, that would be saying that humans don't, like, how do I phrase this? That humans have to have one purpose. And that, you know, if you are willing to believe that God created us with a divine purpose, that doesn't necessarily mean that, like, it's one specific purpose. Now you could say, he wants us to advance the kingdom of heaven, or he wants us to spread Christendom. Well, that isn't a singular thing either. I mean, that's a kind of an overarching idea. And in the same way, like with trees, if you were to say God created the heavens and the earth, and he created all of these trees, you know, if he designed it to where they have multiple purposes, like we make lumber with it,
sure,
or we, you know, fashion a stump into a stool or something. But
is there an objective wrong way to use a stump? Or an objectively wrong way to use a chair?
Well, it would depend who is the judge of that.
This is true. So I think maybe there has to be a God in order for there to be a purpose, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain degree, yeah, for sure.
Because otherwise, I don't know what to do. That's where Nietzsche would say you have to invent that sort of purpose, I guess. He would say that we're addicted to meaning.
Yeah, for sure.
So everybody kind of needs a meaning. Like when old people retire, they just get like depressed and die right away.
Yeah.
They know life no longer has meaning, basically.
When you retire early, you die early. That's what they say.
As we're working in a retirement village.
Yeah, this is a crazy place to be working.
Yeah.
It's like perfectly manicured lawns, all these old people with spray tans. It's
CIA-ville.
It is CIA-ville.
I feel like this is a very incoherent video without any kind of telos.
Yeah.
But I think I'm gonna end it here. Because our lunch break's almost over. Ooh, I needed that.
Okay.
Somebody said I fell off. Ooh, I needed that. Yeah, you gotta rephrase, say that question again.
So yeah, it's really easy to go like on a tangent on this idea, but we originally were talking about free will in the terms of evil. And so I brought up the question to Sai, if what we experience, because, you know, I hear this rhetoric all the time, like, how does God allow evil to happen to those who don't deserve it and still be objectively good or objectively loving? And what I said was, how do we know that the atrocities that we see, the evil that we see, something that we could say is, you know, I guess we'd have to say it's subjectively unjustifiable? How do we know that that aligns with God's idea of evil and good? And, you know, you see a lot of these ideas in the Old Testament where, you know, God tells a tribe to take out another tribe, and that includes killing all of the women and children. How does that equate to now, where we would say something like that, is an atrocity?
You could say that that's moral relativism. You could say that God's a moral relativist in that sense, but then who's to say that God can't be a moral relativist? It's a question of whether or not our justice or system of justice is the same as God's.
Yeah, sure.
So I've asked this question before, like if you think about just in the microcosm of the book of Job, which I could easily be misunderstanding, but the way I read it right now is that God's version of justice, because the thing about he's punishing Job, and it seems pretty unjust. Like he's punishing the righteous man and taking all these things away from him for no reason. And that's Job's whole question, is like, how is this happening to me? And to which God answers, who are you to question me? You little worm. And so that begs the question of what that sounds like what God's version of justice is might makes right. So God, therefore, being the most mighty, he can do whatever he wants. So, but us little worms want to say that that's unfair and that's unjust. So does God, but then that brings up the question in my mind of if God is perfect and he's the ultimate example, does God have two different systems of justice? The one that we get to employ, but that would mean that we don't follow the version of justice that God follows, or is there one and we're just misunderstanding it?
Yeah.
I don't know if I said that right.
Well, yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I wouldn't say either of those ideas are like mutually exclusive, but it's a hard thing because we're trying to base assuming if you are to believe that God is perfect and he is all loving, it's like how are we able to say that our version of justice and what we view as moral is like comparable to God's idea? And that, I guess, brings us back to the same conclusion that we got to on our original question. Is like you just can't know. And it is a bit of like a chicken and the egg rhetoric.
Yeah, because it's like we were just talking about slavery, and that there's nothing in the Bible necessarily that would say thou shalt not have slaves. It just kind of tells you how to have slaves that would align with what Yahweh wants. But there is nothing. But then, in the West and nowadays, since the West has largely influenced the rest of culture, we frown upon slavery as a moral evil. So how does this develop? I think it does develop through Christianity, although not directly through the source material.
Yeah, but who's to say that the term of slavery has changed? Like a lot of Christian nations historically have made usury illegal.
Sure.
And usury is, in a way, a form of slavery. And so how can we as a Christian nation justify usury through that way? If we are to say the traditional idea of slavery is wrong, what differentiates usury versus like physically owning somebody?
So what do you mean by usury?
Like charging interest, pretty much.
Oh, I see.
And I think that as a Christian nation now, like we are, and I don't want to say the only ones, but like throughout history, we, not hardly any Christian nations accepted like charging interest.
What about like taxation?
In what way? Like, are you saying
is that kind of like slavery? Like we put in plenty of time and we just get robbed of our money. We don't have any. It just comes along with being a part of the United States government. Like Andrew would say that goes contrary to the Bible, which he would connect back to like the Tower of Babel. It's built with bricks, which symbolizes like kind of governments and nations. And then you got the meat pots in Egypt, where it's like, you remember when he was talking about that? It's like the meat pots, like cut off your flesh, cut off your legs, and boil them into this collective pot. So it's like, and the Bible's against this idea in some ways. I'm just spitballing this, but like, is that also a type of slavery?
Yeah, I would say so. And like Andrew brought up a great point about religion, where he was saying that definitively the American government is a religion.
Yeah.
And would taxation be a form of tithing to that religion?
People are immediately going to bring up pay to Caesar what is owed to Caesar.
Yeah.
I don't know how he gets around that necessarily.
Yeah.
But he also, I think what he says, how he defines religion is giving alms to the poor and needy, or it's like support. It's sort of a support group. Religion, the word religion comes from this Greek word religio or something like that. It's the same root word that we get ligament, which means like it's like tying together.
Okay.
So religion is just sort of tying things together. So that's kind of what the United States government is, because we are a sort of, any government is a big sort of collective.
Sure.
Now, I don't know the answer to get around this other than having a theocracy where God is coming to us and leading us in a fiery cloud or something. But how do you if you were to like follow the Bible in just like, say, a completely radical Protestant way, which is what I think that Andrew would definitely be, how are we supposed to exist without governments? It doesn't really make sense to me in a physical, actual, besides just like the Old Testament, them being led around by God Himself.
Sure.
How do we get around that? Is it anti-biblical? I'm sure many people are gonna completely. We're just talking. This is whatever, but that's an interesting rabbit hole. What did we start off on?
Just like if our idea of evil aligns with God's idea of evil.
Yeah, especially if we come to different ideas and conclusions that we all kind of hold as being objective, like, owning another human is evil, yet God doesn't necessarily objectively say, thou shalt not own slaves, but so that's where like somebody like Hegel is going to say that it takes time to like kind of develop these ideas over time, and that's like this collective Geist, this collective spirit. I could be completely getting all this wrong for anybody who actually understands Hegel, but so these things, it's kind of like a process or a development cycle in a way to get to these ideas. But you can take a lot of wrong turns with that too.
Yeah.
So if there's one objective like stance, why didn't God lay it out perfectly like to begin with? Like, why do we have to try to like figure this stuff out? Do you think?
I don't know how to answer that. I love when I hear like a Protestant would just say, "It's just faith, man. You just gotta have faith."
Yeah.
Which it almost it's like a slap in the face, because that doesn't answer anything. But
you have to, for me it seems like as a Protestant, you're in the same relativistic kind of camp of like having to figure all these things out, whereas but you could also just be Catholic or Orthodox and kind of just trust that somebody else knows, maybe. I don't, that's a bad thing. It's probably totally inaccurate for me to say. It's just how it looks on the surface from an outside perspective. I don't know how you come to to just sort of giving up your like this relativistic thing and just say, I just trust this greater source.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody kind of has to do that to some degree, because you can't know everything, and you can't know it. You can easily be wrong about things, so you have to appeal to authority at some level. But for me, it's like, if we're thinking about if there is some objective source, but we're unable to interpret it perfectly, there's a perfect source, we can't interpret it perfectly, then we're still have the same relativistic problem in a way. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and kind of what I was saying earlier is that a lot of these answers that, whether it's atheists or, I feel like Christians are the ones who don't answer those questions as much as anybody else. Mm-hmm. Is that the formula with theism is you leave a lot of those questions up to faith. You just say, well, I can't fully understand that, and a lot of people would just say, God didn't design us to comprehend that. Mm-hmm. It's too broad of an idea, it's too complex of an idea for us to understand that.
You would have to have an infinite mind to understand the infinite purpose. Ultimate purpose.
And which is a bit cowardice, I'd say, but I think a lot of people just result to just not answer that question for themselves and just say it's a level of faith. So to a certain degree, it is a game for the atheists.
Yeah.
Because this is a overgeneralization, but I would say when we were talking about purpose, if you are to believe in God, then He defines purpose for you. But if you don't, then you kind of have to find that for yourself. And you could find that, say in universal, there's universal laws or, relative laws that, you abide by, and that in turn, you discover your purpose. But I think it's a lot easier as a Christian to just say, well, that's God's responsibility, that's God's task to find that for me. And so I think a lot of Christians don't have good answers for that type of thing because they don't try.
Yeah, they may not be able to perfectly interpret what their purpose is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like for me, I can't. It's really easy to just say, well, God wanted me to advance the kingdom of heaven. It's well, what does that mean? Yeah. What does that look like? A life of, say, building houses. Does that glorify God? And is that a purpose worth fulfilling? You kind of go back into the, well, how do I know that for sure? How do I have certainty about that? And you would just say, well, I just have to have faith.
Yeah, I think that having certainty is definitely a preference for people, and maybe not so much of a preference for everybody else, for certain people. Mm-hmm. Where that's where the faith thing comes in of well, I trust that whatever I'm doing now is what I'm supposed to be doing. But then there's also the tricky thing of well, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But all things work together for the good of how's that verse go? I forget. But whatever. We should probably end it now.
We were so fast so much.
Yeah.